Hi everybody, and welcome back to Teachers Talk Money, where I help teachers master their money in order to give back to themselves. Today we're going to be talking all about credit cards and building credit. I felt like it was time for me to address this topic because there's so much information out there that I feel like really misses the point of what building your credit is about, or is just completely bad advice when put into practice for thousands of people. So we're going to talk about all of this today. But to get started, I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about my history with credit cards and building credit. I got my first credit card my senior year of college after really hearing that it was something I needed to do in order to start building up my credit. I did not love the idea of it. I had always used a debit card from 16 years old till that point in time, and it made sense to me that I was using my own money from the bank to pay with things. And it didn't make sense to me to have a credit card because it went through this third party and technically I was borrowing the money and then paying it off. And to me, it just seemed like kind of an unnecessary thing as somebody who had a good amount of money for emergency savings while I was in college. I felt really weird because my parents had told me that it was an important thing to build up credit. This is what my friends were saying, this is what I was reading online. But it just felt like such a strange system and such a strange way for me to do that. And it felt weird to me that I had a very low or no credit score, even though I had never borrowed money except my student loans. And that's because the system is definitely broken. I will not try to convince you otherwise. I very, very much believe that the credit system is extremely strange and doesn't really make sense. That being said, it's the system we live in, so we need to find a way to kind of balance what makes sense to us and working within this system. When I started to dig more into the topic of credit cards online, I found horror stories of people who got them when they were teenagers, maxed them out, believing that they had this much money to spend, even though it wasn't really money that they had in their bank account, and suddenly they were in thousands of dollars of consumer debt. And this wasn't uncommon. And it's because credit cards are predatory. The fact that we don't have any financial education in high school for most of us, and that we're given these cards when we're teenagers before having any mandatory financial literacy, creates this huge issue where people are overspending and then getting into so much debt at super high interest rates. And they're not even able to make enough money necessarily at that point in their lives to dig them out of it. I also heard stories of people who simply ran into emergencies and they had the card there for an emergency, which is a blessing in a lot of ways because you're able to actually cover that urgent thing that came up. But regardless of what you used the money for, suddenly they were in debt because they used money that they didn't have. And of course, early on in my personal finance journey, when I was trying to learn about everything possible in order to get my financial life in order, I inevitably ran into Dave Ramsey, and I actually loosely followed his baby steps for a little bit of time during my very early debt-free journey. Now, I want to say up front that at this point in my personal finance education, I very strongly disagree with a lot of what Dave Ramsey says. But one of the things early on that was a huge red flag for me was his position on credit cards. He advises people, no matter what their circumstances or their relationship to credit, that they cut up all their cards and they do not have a credit score. The reason he says this is that a lot of things that you need a credit score for, you can kind of get around, like car rentals. There are now rental companies that will take a debit card, or if you're trying to buy a house, you can do something called manual underwriting, and in place of having a credit score, they can just do a thorough kind of look at all of your bank accounts in order to let you know if you qualify for that house. So there are other measures for a lot of the things that you need a credit score for. However, there aren't for all of them, and we'll get into that in a minute. One thing that there are not a lot of options for when you don't have a credit score is apartments. I knew that I was going to look at the very competitive housing market of DC in order to find an apartment to rent. And I knew that without a credit score, my options, which were already not great and very limited because I was moving into a competitive housing market, would be even more limited if I wasn't able to give a credit score. Is it possible that some apartment complexes won't need a credit score, or that they'll be willing to do some form of manual underwriting to rent you an apartment? Absolutely. Is it likely in a competitive housing market when you're under a time crunch and landlords are not trying to go through anything extra to get you in their apartments? Absolutely not. So for me, a credit score was an extremely useful tool. And with more people renting than buying nowadays, I don't think that that is going to change for a long time. So for me, I'm extremely glad that I did not follow that advice blindly, because it would have had a net negative effect on my life, which is not the advice I want to be giving to anybody either. So I'm not going to tell you today, unless you're a very specific type of person, to cut up your credit cards. Dave has a point in that a ton of people, if they have the credit card, cannot resist the temptation to spend the money they don't have, and they will go further into debt, and it will have a net negative effect on their lives. So if that is you, then it's very important that you consider cutting up your credit cards, or getting a credit card that's not going to allow you to overspend. I personally know a lot of people for which this is true. Because for many people, while using credit cards and building your score can help you out in theory, it actually does have the effect of getting them into more debt. But aside from being able to rent whatever apartment I like, there are also other benefits of using credit cards if you are using them very intentionally as a tool for your finances. I think this is an area where we need to have a growth mindset about our finances. Do you guys like my little inserting of teacher buzzwords? And what I mean by that is that I don't believe that just because a credit card got you into debt when you were a teenager, or 5 years ago, or 10 years ago, that you are never capable of responsibly using a credit card. I would absolutely never have that limiting belief about somebody. If you are here watching this video trying to do right by your finances, in all likelihood, you can change your habits and create better financial habits. I believe that you should learn how to effectively use a credit card instead of just cutting it up and saying that it's evil. And maybe this is going to be a process for you, and that's okay. But I'd rather you have the tools, have the growth mindset, and actually change your habits instead of kind of doing this weird cold turkey, all or nothing way of looking at your finances. And once again, I know a ton of people in my life who have personally reformed their habits. And it's not just the people in my life, it's other financial influencers too. A really great example of this is Chelsea from The Financial Diet. I will link a video below where she talks about her history with credit card usage. But the SparkNotes version is that when she was a teenager, she got into a really predatory credit card system and got into hundreds of dollars of debt. Now she's a full adult woman who runs a personal finance company and is able to build her credit and give advice to others on how to do so. So that is my spiel on using credit cards and why I don't think cutting them up is really the best idea for everyone. So now let's talk about your credit score, how to build it, and why you would want to build that credit score. I don't think I've ever publicly shared my credit score because it's really not that important of a number to me. Right now it's at 736 to ease any of your curiosity you might have about it. I will say that the one thing that I like about Dave Ramsey's philosophy is he does have you actually question the credit system a little bit, because it is something that is very, very questionable. The fact that people believe that their credit score is a measure of how good they are with money is a really big problem, because that's absolutely not what that score is measuring at all. As somebody who is debt-free and has a pretty high net worth for my age and my career, my credit score is not super amazing. It's pretty high, and I'm not going to negate that because I know that a lot of people have much lower credit scores than that. But my point is, I know people in my life who have a much higher credit score than me that are in tons of debt and have a lower net worth than I do. Your credit score is a predictor for companies about how good you will be about paying off that debt. But the way it's measured isn't even super accurate to that. For example, when I paid off my student loans, I was in the best financial position of my life. And I think that I had done everything to prove that I would be really, really good at paying off debt. In fact, I did so way more rapidly than I needed to. And yet when I closed those accounts, my credit score decreased a lot, because one of the things that your creditors measure is how many open accounts you currently have. So once again, it is not a great litmus test for how good you are with your money at all. And it's not even accurate in necessarily showing how good you will be at paying off debt. So yeah, it's 100% a broken system. That being said, there are benefits to having a high credit score. Obviously, it opens up more options with renting and buying homes, as well as potentially will lower your interest rates for something like purchasing a car. But one thing that I think is really applicable to everyone, regardless of their housing situation or whether or not they are going to take on debt to purchase a vehicle, is that credit cards, if you play the system right, have really good rewards. This can take the form of cash back, where you actually get a little bit of passive income just for spending money with that card, or the form of airline miles that you can use to travel hack and take free and reduced cost trips places. This is why people in the FIRE movement, the financial independence, retire early movement, love credit cards. And they do something called credit card churning, where they use each card at a different time per month to not only build their credit score, but to make sure that they are maximizing all the benefits that they're getting from that credit card. That is super complicated to me and kind of comes off a little coupon cuttery. For me, as somebody who wants to live a very simple financial life, if that's your jam and you want to get all up in all those credit cards and make a spreadsheet about it, I encourage you to. But for somebody aiming for a simple life, my goal is just to have maybe 2 to 3 credit cards at a time that I'm getting different kinds of rewards from. So let's talk about how to raise your credit score. It seems like this super nebulous, mercurial thing to a lot of people, but oh my gosh, those words were such English teacher words. I'm sorry, everyone. But raising your credit score is actually pretty simple. You want to make sure that you're paying off your card on time, 100% every month, so that you do not carry a balance from month to month, and therefore you're not accruing any interest. Because if you are paying massive amounts of interest, then any of the rewards that I just talked about are probably going to be completely negated by the high interest rate that you are paying. So do not carry a balance month to month if you are trying to utilize these cards and really milk them for all they're worth. And that will positively affect 2 of the factors that the credit score people look at, and that is making your payments on time, number 1, and utilizing less than 1% of your credit limit. Another thing is to keep your cards open for a long time, because the age of credit matters to creditors as well. And then finally, having multiple lines of credit open, if it's something you're comfortable with, is another way to kind of boost that credit score. So to sum it up, because there's such a wide array of experiences people can have with credit cards, I am never going to give the blanket advice to cut them up or to always have multiple credit cards, because clearly it's about, at the end of the day, looking in the mirror, knowing who you are and what your habits are and the change that you're capable of making, and determining what is best for you based on that. And remember that your credit score is nothing more than a tool to enhance your finances. It is not in any way the foundational measure of what makes you good with money. I hope this video was helpful and thorough to you. This is a very complicated topic, so please leave any questions you have down below. Do not forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the like button on this video. It helps me a lot. I am so happy you guys are here with me. Please remember to come back next week for our next video. Have an amazing week, you guys. Bye.